Okay, so in the last video, we talked a little bit about what causes shifts in demand and supply. So again, shifts in demand curve means there's more or less demand for products at any given price. And one way to think about that, just before we move on, is you think about like if you're selling, say, hamburgers, for example, at McDonald's, and let's say the price of, so you're looking, say, Big Macs, and the price of meat goes up. And you ask yourself the question, would there be more or less demand at any given price? Now, if the meat goes up, but the price of the burger stays the same or the Big Mac stays the same, the demand's not shifting because there won't be any change of demand, assuming the price stays the same. So that's not a shift in demand. It'll be a shift in the supply curve because businesses will be less willing to supply the burger at the same price because they're going to make less profit because it's costing them more to make. Okay, so you keep asking yourself the question: would demand change if the price was the same? If not, then there's no change in demand. So if the wages of work is increased but the price stayed the same, you probably wouldn't know that as a consumer. So the demand would stay the same. Whereas if the Big Mac was effectively advertised, then there'd be more demand at any given price because more people would buy Big Macs at the same price, and therefore the demand curve would shift to the right. Shifting the demand curve to the right, here's an example of how we get back to equilibrium. So here's equilibrium one, where demand used to equal supply at a price of $3 with 800 coffee cups sold. Then suddenly there was a shift in the demand curve to the right, which is evidenced by D2 being to the right of D1. And what that means is now there's more demand for coffee cups at any given price. So at the same price of $3, there's now 1,600 coffee cups demanded instead of the old 800. Okay, so looking on the x-axis, there's 1,600 instead of 800. The supply hasn't changed. This is still how much we're supplying, but the demand has now increased to 1,600. So we now have a shortage of coffee cups, of 800 coffee cups. How do we get rid of that? We raise the price. So we raise the price from $3 to $4, which goes from E1 to E2. And that does two things. When we raise the price, the demand suddenly contracts a little bit because some people no longer want it. Now they're at $4. So demand contracts from 1,600 to 1,200 coffee cups at the higher price. So let's say initially it was, let's say it's exam season and people are drinking more coffee to stay awake. So at a price of $3, demand shifted from 800 to 1,600. Suddenly we've got a shortage of coffee cups. So to get rid of that in a free market, we raise the price. We raise the price to $4. And suddenly demand contracts back down to 1,200. So some people that were willing to buy it at $3 now don't want it anymore. And the supply now, because it's now more profitable at the higher price, supply now expands. It doesn't shift, but the higher price now says to producers, all right, coffee's now more profitable, and the supply curve expands from 800 to 1,200 coffee cups supplied or produced. So now we're back at equilibrium, where we now have a price of $4, but 1,200 coffee cups are now sold instead of the old 800 coffee cups. So to go through the whole process, demand shifted to the right because suddenly it was, say, more popular because it's winter, or the price of tea increased, or it's been advertised effectively, or whatever. Demand has now shifted to the right. We have a shortage of 800 units. We raise the price to $4 to get rid of that shortage. When we increase the price, supply then expands because it's more profitable, which is evidenced by this. Demand contracts because it's now less affordable, and some people might not value it that high. And you end up with a new equilibrium price at a higher price of $4 and more quantity sold of 1,200. So there are essentially four shifts that can occur. When demand shifts to the right, you end up with more demand at the old price, which leads to a shortage. To eliminate the shortage, you raise the price. The higher price causes demand to contract because it's less affordable, and supply expands because it's more profitable, and you end up at a new equilibrium at a higher price and higher quantity sold. If demand shifts to the left, you've now got a surplus because now there's less demand at the old price, assuming supply stayed the same. You've got a surplus, so to get rid of the surplus, you lower the price. When we lower the price, demand then expands, so because it becomes more affordable, and supply contracts because it becomes less profitable, and you get a new equilibrium at a lower price and lower quantity sold. Okay, so they're your shifts in demand. If supply shifts to the right, so now producers are more willing to supply at any given price, what's going to happen now is you're going to get a surplus because there's now demand stayed the same, but there's now more supply. So this might be the case, say there's new technology which allows you to produce something faster. So say we're producing chocolate bars and suddenly there's now more supply because we've got better technology. We're going to have a surplus of chocolate bars now. To get rid of that surplus, you lower the price. Otherwise, you're going to have some left over. The lower price causes demand to expand like always. and supply contracts like always because it's less profitable, and you'll end up at a new equilibrium, but your new equilibrium will be at a lower price, but a higher quantity sold. Okay, so the difference is when demand shifts right, higher price and higher quantity sold. Demand shifts left, lower price and lower quantity sold. Supply shifts right, lower price but higher quantity sold. And when supply shifts left, you'll end up with a higher price and lower quantity sold, which I'll talk about later or now. Supply shifts to the left, which means now producers are less willing to supply at any given price. So that might be, say, like there's a cyclone that wipes out a bunch of bananas. To eliminate the shortage, producers will raise the price. The higher price causes demand to contract because it's now less affordable, and supply expands because it's more profitable at the higher price, and you end up at a new equilibrium at a higher price and lower quantity sold. So to sum up, when demand shifts right, you get a higher price and higher quantity sold. Demand shifts left, lower price and lower quantity sold. Supply shifts right, lower price but higher quantity. And supply shifts left, higher price but lower quantity. So essentially the demand shifts cause the same impact, so they'll both move in the same direction, either both higher or both lower. But if supply shifts, there'll be one in each direction. Supply shifts right, you get a lower price and higher quantity. Supply shifts left, a higher price but lower quantity. So to summarize, in market economies, it's the force of demand and supply that determine what is produced. Increased demand for a product leads to a higher price, and self-interested producers shift more resources, so land, labour and capital, to that area of production. Wages are the same. If there's in a market and there's wages go up, supply will expand because more people will want to work in that industry, and demand will contract because it costs you more to hire people. But we won't go into detail about wages in this video. Again, last point, if you look, you'll match up the graph to the right statement. So this one here, supply shifted to the left. Which one's going to cause supply shifting to the left? That would be an increase in the price of materials used in production. Okay, so 1 matches up with D. Graph 2, demand shifted to the left. Which one's going to cause demand to shift to the left? That would be an increase in the price of a complement. Okay, because if suddenly the price of printer go up, there'll be less demand for printer ink. Graph 3 is demand shifting to the right, which is an increase in the price of a substitute, because now there'll be more demand for this product at any given price. And a decrease in production costs will cause the supply curve to shift to the right, because it's now more cheaper to produce and therefore more profitable at any given price. In the last video, we're going to talk about the problems with market economies and government intervention.